The first time I realized my wife was no longer on my side, it wasn't during an argument or a moment of anger. It was during silence. A deliberate, calculated silence that spoke louder than any words she could have used. We had been married for 11 years, long enough to have routines that felt permanent, long enough to believe we understood each other without needing to explain every thought. We met when neither of us had much. I was building a modest career, working long hours, dreaming about stability. She was ambitious, sharp, and endlessly confident. I admired that about her. I believed her strength would complement my steadiness. I believed marriage meant standing shoulder to shoulder, especially when the world pushed back. For a long time, it felt true. Her career took off faster than mine. Promotions came quickly. Her name started carrying weight in rooms I had never entered. At first, I was proud. I bragged about her to friends. I adjusted my schedule to support hers. When she traveled, I handled the house. When she worked late, I waited up. I never once felt smaller because of her success. I thought we were winning together. But power has a way of changing how people see loyalty. It started subtly. She began talking about optics, about how certain things looked to people above her. She stopped introducing me as her husband and started saying my name first, like the title mattered less. At work events, she positioned herself strategically, standing closer to executives, drifting just far enough away from me that conversations wouldn't overlap. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself I was being insecure. The first public fracture came at a company dinner. One of her senior colleagues made a joke at my expense. It was framed as humor, but it was sharp, meant to land. Everyone laughed. I looked at my wife, expecting something, anything. A smile of reassurance. A hand on my arm. A quick comment to redirect the moment. She laughed too. Not nervously. Not awkwardly. Comfortably. That was the moment something shifted in me. I didn't react. I didn't confront her there. I smiled, finished my meal, and drove us home in silence. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and chose not to. When I brought it up later, she dismissed it. Said I was overreacting. Said I didn't understand workplace culture. Said standing up for me would have made things complicated. Complicated. That word became her shield. Over time, the pattern repeated.
Her colleagues would speak down to me.
Family members of hers would hint that I was lucky. Decisions were made about our lives without consulting me, then presented as already settled. When I objected, she framed it as resistance to her growth, as insecurity, as fear. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. She spoke with calm authority, the same tone she used in meetings, the same tone that commanded respect elsewhere. At home, that tone became law. I realized something frightening. She wasn't choosing against me emotionally. She was choosing power logically. Every time there was a conflict between protecting her image and protecting our marriage, she chose the former. Not because she hated me, but because she valued leverage more than intimacy. The marriage slowly turned into a hierarchy. I noticed how careful she was with people above her, how forgiving she was of their flaws. I noticed how strict she became with me. Mistakes I made were patterns. Mistakes others made were context. I was expected to adjust, to understand, to be patient. She was allowed to evolve without explanation. When I tried to talk about how lonely I felt, she reframed it as a demand on her time. When I asked for partnership, she called it pressure. When I asked for loyalty, she called it control. The most painful part wasn't betrayal in the dramatic sense. There was no affair that I knew of. No screaming matches. No slammed doors. It was the quiet realization that when power entered the room, marriage quietly exited. The breaking point came during a professional dispute that spilled into our personal lives. A decision she made at work negatively affected me financially. It wasn't unavoidable. She had a choice. She could have advocated for a fair outcome, or at least warned me. Instead, she stayed silent until it was done. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She explained. She told me I should be proud of her position. She told me sacrifices were necessary. She told me she couldn't risk her credibility for personal matters. Personal matters. As if our marriage were a hobby. That night, I didn't argue. I listened. And for the first time, I understood the truth, clearly. I was no longer her partner. I was a variable. Something to manage, not protect. I started paying attention to myself instead of trying to earn back a place I shouldn't have had to fight for. I noticed how tense I felt in my own home, how often I measured my words, how often I swallowed discomfort to keep the peace. I realized I had been shrinking quietly over years. The day I decided to leave wasn't dramatic. There was no final fight. I simply stopped asking her to choose me. I told her I was moving out. She was shocked, not because she loved me deeply, but because she hadn't anticipated resistance. She asked how this would affect her image. She asked what people would think. She asked if I could wait until a better time. That was my answer. I left with clarity instead of anger.
Pain, yes.
Grief, absolutely. But also relief. Because I finally understood that love cannot survive where power is worshipped above commitment. In the months after, I rebuilt quietly. I found my voice again. I reconnected with friends who reminded me who I was before I became careful. I learned that partnership isn't about dominance or optics. It's about mutual protection, especially when it costs something. Sometimes I think about her. I wonder if she ever noticed the moment she stopped being my wife and became my superior. I wonder if power still feels worth it when there's no one left to come home to. Marriage isn't about who stands taller in public. It's about who stands with you when it would be easier not to. And when someone consistently protects power instead of the person beside them, the marriage is already over, long before anyone leaves.